Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in the East. Happy Monday. A blistering rebuke for Donald Trump's retribution campaign from what former FBI Director Jim Comey on this program coined, quote, the last standing leg on the three-legged stool of our democracy. That would, of course, be the federal judiciary. A federal judge today quashing subpoenas from the Trump DOJ to Minnesota elected officials. They include Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and others. This move all but crushes an investigation launched during the height of that brutal and violent occupation of the city of Minneapolis. It, of course, led to the deaths of two American citizens, Renee Nicole Good, a mother, and Alex Preddy, a VA nurse. In a ruling dated June 17th but unsealed earlier today, Judge Patrick Schultz, a former clerk to conservative Judge Antonin Scalia and appointed to the bench by former President George W. Bush, writes this, quote, initiating a criminal investigation in order to harass political opponents or to coerce them into taking official action, particularly official action that the federal government cannot directly require those political opponents to take, is a blatantly unlawful and unethical use of the grand jury process. The only question, then, is whether the challenged subpoenas were issued for one of those forbidden purposes. The court has no doubt that they were. The judge goes on from there. It only gets worse for Trump. He calls out the Trump administration for wielding the DOJ as a weapon for Donald Trump's political purposes. The Bush-appointed judge writes this, quote, the subpoenas were a part of a broader campaign to coerce state and local officials in Minnesota to assist the Trump administration in its enforcement of immigration laws. And of course, this campaign played out against the backdrop of the Trump administration's well-established history of using criminal investigations to retaliate against and pressure the president's political and personal adversaries. The Justice Department has not weighed in, but in a statement, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz did. He said this, quote, today's ruling is a victory for the rule of law and for our democracy. I am proud to have joined Minnesotans in exercising our fundamental American freedoms, freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, to disagree with our government. These rights are enshrined in our Constitution, and they are what makes America great. An independent judiciary is a pillar of our democracy. It is one reason why the U.S. has been that shining city on the hill for nearly 250 years. The U.S. Justice Department is pursuing criminal investigations into the president's political opponents. This case was just one example of that, but we're seeing daily reminders of this administration's lawlessness in Minnesota and all around the country. We all must continue to seek justice and uphold the rule of law. That breaking news of a judge ruling that the Trump DOJ has dramatically overreached in its pressure campaign against Minnesota elected officials who resisted the administration's deadly immigration policies is where we start today. Former DOJ pardon attorney Liz Oyr is back with us. She was fired by Trump's DOJ after refusing to reinstate actor Mel Gibson's gun rights. She has a new podcast that's launching today. It is perfectly named, quote, is this really legal? A question I ask her every time she's here. Also joining us, Puck News senior political columnist, national affairs analyst John Heilman's back with us. Also joining us, Scott MacFarlane. He's the chief Washington correspondent for Midas Touch. So, Liz, today you don't have to answer that question for me because a Bush-appointed Scalia clerk who looked at this case said no, it wasn't legal to, and I believe there was reporting in the New York Times and NPR and elsewhere that this DOJ push to investigate and prosecute Governor Walz and Mayor Frey and other Democrats led to mass resignations in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But a judge seems to have those purged prosecutors' backs in saying that the whole thing was illegal. Explain the significance.
This is really significant, Nicole, for a number of reasons. One is because, as you said, this is a very respected conservative judge who's been around for a long time, who is not tolerating this misuse of the subpoena power by the Trump administration. Two, it is significant because there is a very high legal bar to block a subpoena. A subpoena is an investigative tool. You don't have to have evidence of guilt. You just have to have a good faith basis to investigate the possible commission of a crime, to to issue a subpoena, this judge is saying the Justice Department cannot even meet that bar. And in fact, he found very clearly in a stinging rebuke that the Justice Department issued these subpoenas for improper purposes, specifically to harass and retaliate against Democrat elected officials in the state of Minnesota. And the tone of it is just very clear. He says that there is a wealth of evidence that shows that the Trump administration issued these subpoenas in bad faith. And if you remember back to that time, that's a time when Todd Blanche, who's now trying to become the Attorney General, was out there accusing Tim Walz and Jacob Frey of being terrorists. He used the word terrorist in a tweet, saying that he's coming for them, and that's not a threat, it's a promise. And this just really shows the lie to all of that. There was no there. It was all a charade that was being done for political reasons to harass the president's political opponents, and this very respected conservative judge has shut it down.
Liz, I think it's not the first time, right? I think that the investigation was stopped at the same juncture into Jerome Powell. So I think this is the second time we're at a very early stage of an intended political prosecution. A judge has said, I don't think so. What does that mean, that judges are looking at Todd Blanche and saying you're not even acting like a normal Justice Department?
Yeah, it's interesting. Todd Blanche said at his last confirmation hearing, he looked Tom Tillis in the eye when he was undergoing a hearing to be confirmed as the Deputy Attorney General, and said that he would not allow the Justice Department to pursue any revenge prosecutions under his watch. Tillis said, you promised not even a whiff of a political investigation, and Blanche said, I can commit to that. And since then, we have seen that the Justice Department has been totally politicized. What they are doing is they are using the machinery of justice to punish Donald Trump's political enemies. And the point is not even to get criminal convictions. They don't even need to bring charges, as we saw in the case of Jerome Powell, this case in Minnesota. They are just using tools of investigations to harass the people on the receiving end. It is a tremendous punishment to be on the other side of a frivolous, meritless criminal investigation. It is incredibly time consuming. It is incredibly costly. It's incredibly stressful. So they're doling out punishment without having any good faith basis to believe that they can even secure a conviction of a crime, which is a total misuse and abuse of the justice system.
Heilman, you were in Minneapolis. Tensions could not have been higher at the moment. However, this chapter in American political history ends, it will be a turning point, either the high watermark of resistance in America or the match that lit the country's courage. It inspired artists and athletes to speak out for the very first time during his second term. Bruce Springsteen joined your friend Tom Morello for a concert there, unveiled streets of Minneapolis. The Minnesota Timberwolves became the first professional sports team, maybe not the first, but one of the first in the second term to speak out against Trump policies when they held a moment of silence for Renee Nicole Good. I think it was before Alex Preddy was killed, and someone chanted anti-ICE stuff and people applauded. I mean, it could not be a bigger point in this story. And to have an action that they sought to take at that high watermark of their power and bullying prowess rebuked so completely by a Scalia clerk is just stunning.
Stunning and gratifying, Nicole, I think, for those of us like Jim Comey who believe that the judiciary is the last, is the one remaining leg on the stool that you cited at the beginning of the segment here. But I do want to, and so yes, stunning, and the notion that the riposte from the Justice Department about about this judge who is a Scalia clerk and also a George W. Bush appointee, practicing kind of left-wing insurrectionist lawfare against the Trump administration is just laughable, like so many things that they say about anybody who rules against them. But I do want to go back to something that Liz just said a second ago, which is, when I was there, I stopped by City Hall and sat down with Mayor Frey, and talked to him about what it was like to learn, that in the middle of all of that conflict in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, in Minneapolis specifically and in Minnesota more broadly, that he was being targeted for criminal investigation. And, I will say he was resolute. He was confident that he would get this outcome, that this eventually the courts would be on his side and on the other public official sides who were being investigated. But to Liz's point, it was, I would say that some of these investigations were undertaken almost after the administration knew that they had sort of lost the battle of Minneapolis and were kind of in retreat, but launched these investigations from their point of view as a win-win, which was, well, if we're somehow allowed to go ahead with this investigation, we'll be able to investigate and torment these people unjustifiably well into the future. Maybe we'll even get some convictions. And if more likely our investigations are ruled to be illegal, we will still have fired a warning shot across the bow of any public official in any future state that decides to stand up and do what's right, do what's protected. And so I think that it's not to say this isn't a clear victory for the cause of right and for the cause of the resistance here, but it's just to note that even in defeat in this instance, in this battle, the administration is still trying to fight a longer war, which is to try to create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. Even in losing, it's trying to let people know down the line that they will still come at them guns blazing. I mean that metaphorically, not necessarily literally, although in some cases literally too. They will come at them guns blazing politically and legally if they decide to stand up to Donald Trump. And that is something that other mayors and other governors around the country, even as they admire what happened in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, they took note of that. I'm sure every governor and mayor who is worried about ICE incursions going forward understands what the stakes are now more clearly than they did before.